Hello, everybody. Hello, Seattle. Hello, people on the internet. I'm very, very excited for today's Zillow Speaker Series guest. I got a phone call about probably almost 2 years ago now from Andreessen Horowitz, one of the most successful and prominent venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, and Jeff Jordan, who is the partner there, who I know really well. He said, there's this incredible company in Seattle that you have to check out, and we're thinking about investing in it, and if we do, we'd really like you to represent Andreessen Horowitz on the board and take a board seat. And I said, wow, that's a big honor, that's pretty cool, what do they do? And he said, well, it's a nail polish company. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about nail polish. He said, look, there's this incredibly talented entrepreneur, she's extraordinary, she went to Princeton undergrad and Yale Law School, I mean, so she's ridiculously whip smart, and it's not really a nail polish company, as she will describe. It's actually a software company, it's a social media company, it's a beauty brand, and it's a cutting-edge, innovative company. And I said, okay, I'll, reluctantly and skeptically, I will meet this person. Anyway, I met Jane Park, our guest, and immediately became incredibly, as enthusiastic about her business and her as Andreessen Horowitz was. And Andreessen Horowitz went on to lead a very large venture capital investment. And then just a couple months ago, as Jane will probably tell you, there was another very significant venture capital investment. And here we are today, one of the coolest and most innovative Seattle startups. Please welcome Jane Park from Julep.
Awesome. Okay. I'm pretty loud anyway. So anyway, my parents actually cried when I told them that I was leaving my corporate job to to start a company. And they said, oh my gosh, another Korean person in the nail business. They're going to think, all our friends are going to think you didn't really become a lawyer. So they've since come around and they've been incredibly supportive, but I think it's funny how sometimes the biggest stereotypes that are facing you, you don't even notice, because I started Julep because I have a passion for women and for building a business that is empowering women. So Julep is a Beauty 3.0 company. We're a full stack company, which means we're doing everything from the front end and meeting consumers and challenging and creating a different online experience through to actually manufacturing the product. So we launch over 300 new products a year, and those products are really beloved in the beauty community. So we've been featured as an Oprah's Favorite Things. We won the CW Award for Best Indie Beauty Brand, and we're at Sephora, Nordstrom, and QVC. So this is important to us because we want to win in both spaces. We want to be the most innovative e-commerce company around, but we also want to be a for real beauty brand, not one of these fake online things. So in both spaces, we're really excited to be pushing the boundaries. And our 4 Seattle area test parlors are what fuel a lot of the innovation. So if you guys have been in one of our parlors, you're not just getting a service, you're helping us decide what the next generation of beauty products is, what's effective, what works. And it's something that we are constantly putting into rotation in our parlors. So you should ask about that the next time you're there. As a brand, we believe in beauty without rules. That means that we don't adhere to the regular rules of the beauty category and traditional retail, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. And we're all about empowering women. So it's not about, hey, you should look a certain way, you should be a certain age or weigh a certain amount. It really is a lot more about connection and community. And because we're the first beauty brand to grow up in an era post-social media, it's sort of integrated into our DNA in a very interesting way that fuels the way that we talk to women. And it's something that's different than what other traditional companies are doing. So just quickly in terms of the way beauty worked, right? So it used to be that you go into a department store and what happens is that somebody puts makeup on you. I was recently in a Nordstrom and I had an amazing experience, but there are times when I go in and there's a blue-eyed, blonde-haired girl and she, one time I had somebody actually draw like an eye fold on me because they didn't know what to do with an Asian eye. So you have those kinds of experiences too. And you walk out looking like a crazy clown and you don't know what to do. So that's not a great experience, even though it's in person. So Beauty 2.0, people came, read the product from behind the counter. You could now play with it at Sephora. You could meet the founders on QVC. And we play in that space a little bit too. But what we're excited about is building a multi-channel, full-stack beauty brand where we really are talking directly to our consumers. We're letting them in behind the gate. We're doing product development collaboratively with them. And there's no dominant player in this space yet who's really thinking about how to transform the online experience to be much more customized, to be much more collaborative. What I can't do when I go into Nordstrom is grab 5 other Asian American women and have them come in with me and try on the product so I can see what it looks like on me and other people who look like me. And I think this is where the online experience can absolutely win in terms of delivering a better shopping experience. So these are some of the 300 products a year that we launch, and they're all proprietary technology. We treat our products like software. So we're constantly doing releases, we're constantly doing updates. We're actually on our 6th iteration of nail polish formula, and I'm excited to have brought samples for you guys here. And for those of you who are not in Seattle, we do have product being sent out to you too. So don't worry. You can test out the world's best nail polish formulation with oxygen technology. It's good for your nails. I don't know if you guys know, when you're in your 40s, your nails grow half as rapidly as when you're in your 20s. So they're getting twice the abuse. This is true of men and women too, so you'll all notice this. And so protecting them and having them healthy is important. So the challenge that we can break through is that in traditional retail, there's limited shelf space. So when you launch a new product, what has to happen is that the product that is there has to come out for the new product to go in. And in today's environment of declining retail sales, a new product going in has a huge pressure to perform from day one. It's got to be a rock star. There's no time for it to build into a beloved product. It's got to be there from day one. And that's why there's huge marketing against it. There's that physical inventory cost of sending it out to a physical network. And so companies like Estee Lauder have said that they're doing fewer new releases every year, even though there's amazing ingredients technology in terms of taking out carcinogens and things that are bad for you, and also efficacy in terms of new ingredients that can really deliver noticeable results. And so what happens is that traditional beauty launches have huge opportunity costs and there's fewer of them. We're launching to an infinite online shelf space, and through our Maven program where women are subscribing to innovation, that gives us the license and permission and distribution channel to be able to create basically whatever we want. Whenever we see a product where we think we can offer something that's better, whether it's our bare face cleansing oil or our charcoal konjac sponge, we can go ahead and create that, and we know we have an immediate audience for it, and nothing has to come off of our online shelf space in order for us to innovate and offer that. So in terms of that subscription box, we're the only company that enables complete customization. So you can take the new products that we offer, or you can, if you have a favorite from other products that we've launched in the past, you can put that in your box too. We're really all about the customer experience and making it fun every month to get exactly what you want from us. Which brings me to our really exciting innovation this year, the Julep Plie Wand. So we have plie stations over here, so afterwards if any of you want to play with it, please come do that. So the quick problem we were trying to solve, and this is sort of an illustration of how we're doing, sort of beauty without rules, right, is that typically nail polish bottles are that short. So what do you do with a pencil when it's that short? You throw it out, right? Because you can't do anything with it. You have no control. You're trying to control it with your 3 fingers. I wouldn't want to have surgery with my doctor holding a scalpel this short because she's not going to have any control. It's a super simple problem. And what we said was, hey, what you need is a longer grip to be able to have the stability and the control that, that is possible when the tool is more shaped to be able to deliver good ergonomics. So there you go. It's a pretty simple idea. I don't know why nobody else has done it ever before. We worked with IDEO, the preeminent design firm, and it was funny because there was a super tattooed guy who came up also with the idea that the wand should bend. So it does that because if you think about how you brush your teeth, you don't brush like this, right? The bristles are perpendicular to the handle so that you can get a better angle on what you're doing. And so he said, hey, you guys are all polishing your nails and your hands are like this. How about if we change it up and the wand bends instead of your arm? I think this is sort of really interesting from a gender dynamics perspective because, there we have both men and women in here, but my experience is that a lot of men, my husband mainly included, blame the tool when they can't do something, right? So my husband started skiing 3 years ago. He's on his 3rd set of skis. Because for sure, if he bought the right pair of skis, he can do a black diamond, right? I've had 1 pair of skis for 10 years. And I'm pretty sure that when I can't do the double black diamond, it's because of me. But a lot of times women say, hey, I am so bad at polishing my nails, I can't polish my nails. And it's in that instance, it's actually not you, it's the tool. It's because the tool sucks, and nothing else in the world that requires dexterity and fine motor skills is that short and stubby. And so super excited. This is a pretty simple idea, but we think it's going to change the way that people experience polishing their nails. And I think it's such a fun way to experience trends. And if you can't afford the $4,000 Birkin bag, you can definitely wear the color that is reminiscent of it so you can still participate in some of the runway trends. And I think being able to have the experience at home where you are having fun with it is super important. So for me, it took this experience. Everybody's always looking at my nails because I run Julep. My 8-year-old said to me, hey, Mommy, even though you run Julep, you're not very good at this. So I was one of those people who was not good at doing my own nails, and it was frustrating and time consuming. And now it's gone from that to being something that I enjoy. I can do it in 5 minutes, and I do it with my glass of wine late at night. So actually, like now, every time I see this, I kind of see a big old glass of wine, which is also an awesome side benefit. And experts like at Allure have called this tool a stroke of genius. So I had to put that up there. So in terms of our brand, I also wanted to share some of the things that we're really excited about is that we donate a percentage of all of our proceeds to organizations that support women. And we created this color, Malala, and 100% of the proceeds from that color are going to her foundation to support the education of girls around the world. And sort of mentioned this, we have had lots of press coverage that we're super grateful for. So quickly, sort of some of the top lessons that I've learned throughout the past few years of being an entrepreneur. And one of my favorite books is Ben Horowitz's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, because until I read that book, most of the time when you run into other entrepreneurs building companies and you ask, how's it going? Everybody's always killing everything, right? We're killing it, we're killing it. And it's like, it's amazing anything is alive given how much entrepreneurs are killing everything. But what was great about his book was admitting that there are hard days, and there are days when his pants don't match his shirt and he's throwing up and crying. And so that was super liberating to read that, oh gosh, it's maybe all of us who have those challenging moments too. So some of the things that I wanted to share about what I've learned throughout this process is that a key thing is to always try something new. I think this is a mental outlook that is different in startups, and it's a personal outlook that you can bring to your job every day. I always ask the question, what would you do if you had your magic wand right now? So that means you have to have a hypothesis for what you would do differently, right? If you have a magic wand and you would leave everything exactly the same as you have it today, put up your hand. Right, like we all have things that we would want to change. And so thinking about how to test into that, how to have the hypothesis and know at every moment what you would be doing. So I used to say that my hypothesis is what I would do if somebody had a gun to my head. I changed it to magic wand because it seemed more friendly. And frankly, nobody has put a gun to my head and said, hey, what would you do? You know, should this box of nail polish or should it have lip gloss? As it turns out, there aren't criminals in the world who care about that question. So it is more of a magic wand question. What would you do if you were starting over from today? And asking that question every day in your job, regardless of what your role is. Another one that I think is really important is that collaboration requires vulnerability and self-knowledge. So this is something that's really important to us at Julep because we're doing so many different things, and I have world-class software engineers and I have world-class beauty product developers, and we all have to work in unison together, otherwise the consumer experience falls apart. And so collaboration isn't just sitting in a room and listening to each other. And if you ask somebody in a job interview, are you collaborative? Like 100% of people say yes, as it turns out. But the way that you really collaborate has to do with self-knowledge and vulnerability and timing. So collaboration requires for you to let people in at a time when they can change the trajectory of your decision, right? So if you go to a team and you say, hey, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, and you're not giving them a chance to change the trajectory, you're not really collaborating. You need to go to people at a time when they can have input, where they can change the course of your action, and that's collaboration. And then that requires vulnerability. So to the extent that we do a lot of this socially and online and on Facebook, hey, there are times we put out an idea and people hate it. And on Facebook, if they hate it, they really, really hate it. So they hate it, and there you go. You've put out an idea that everybody hates in public, and you have to figure out what you're going to learn from that. But it requires self-knowledge, because collaboration also isn't just taking dictation from the public, right? I mean, this is one of the things that bigger CMOs of larger companies always ask me, how do you guys do the social media thing? How do you do collaboration with the crowd? What if they give you an idea you don't like? What if they have input you disregard? And that's what collaboration is, by the way, right? Not everybody gets their own way, by definition. And so everybody gets heard is important, and then you have to know who you are as a company and what you are willing to incorporate in terms of feedback and what you're not willing to incorporate. So crowdsourcing also isn't a matter of, hey, we're going to go out and let everybody else decide what's on our product development agenda. It's still our ideas and our drive, but it's about letting people in. Another thing I learned, especially early on as an entrepreneur, is that it turns out I'm just minimally viable product. So this concept of kind of running fast and getting something out there so you can iterate on it, well, it applies to people too. You know, I was a minimally viable CMO, or the minimally viable chief product officer and the minimally viable chief financial officer, until I could hire into those roles and find people who were better than I was. And I had to be okay with that. Hey, now they're in their role, and I got to hold that role and sort of be the minimally viable product until we could iterate to something better. And I think a lot of us are in that position when you're trying something new, when you're off developing a new product line, or when you are expanding into a new role in your career. It's okay for different periods of time to be minimally viable product, and if you set that expectation, it's much healthier than setting the expectation of perfection and knocking it out of the park on day one. One of my favorite movies is Harry Met Sally. And you guys remember that part where Harry refuses to drive Sally to the airport because he says, someday I'm going to be busy and I'm not going to drive you to the airport, and then you're going to be sad. And so I'm going to start out by never driving you to the airport. I think her response is something like, wow, it's amazing. You look like a normal person, but in fact you're the devil. But as a company and as a leader, I always try to drive her to the airport as long as I can. That means I do handwritten notes to customers. Every day I pick a handful of orders and I personally thank them. I write a note to the consumer. The funny thing is no one has ever written me back. I said this to Howard Behar, who is the COO at Starbucks and has been a great mentor to me. And he said, you know what, he told me that he's written over 200,000 handwritten notes in the course of his lifetime. He counted at one point. And he said, guess how many people have written me back? 0. So he said, shut up, suck it up, and keep going, because it does matter, even when people don't write you back. But hey, it's not scalable, right? I mean, initially when I started Julep, I wrote a handwritten note to every single consumer, and I knew at the time that at some point I wouldn't be able to do that. And with employees, you know, there are times that I try to have coffees with everybody who comes in, and at some point maybe that won't be as possible on that one-on-one interaction. But as long as you can drive her to the airport, and then if you can't, you can figure out something else that you can do that is equally as delightful and shows your intent. One of the things that we always feel as a startup, and I think this applies to regular life as well sometimes, is that success is only a pause in between like huge waves of rejection and things going wrong. I think if you have that expectation, especially when you're building a new business line or when you're trying something new again, which is what we're up to every day, it gives you the permission to sort of understand that you try 9 things or try 10 things and 9 of them don't go right. But that's why you do 10 things, because if you did one thing and it didn't go right, then you'd have a 0% success rate. Earlier this year, I think in May, remember we had a sunny May? My new take on this is I feel like success is like sunshine in Seattle in May. It feels like everybody else has it and we don't. And it shows up in the most unlikely, bizarre places, right? When it's totally unexpected. So that's my other sort of take on that. So my dad is Korean. Actually, a lot of the entrepreneurial, well, I am too, a lot of the entrepreneurial sort of drive that I have in my life, I think, is from watching him. So he lost his parents when he was 9, when the border between North and South Korea went up. So he was at school and he was walking home and the border was put up right there. And so he's never been able to go home again. He's never seen his parents from that day. And he just built a life for himself where he actually went up to an American GI and said, I am a boy, you are a girl, which wasn't true because he was a guy. But because he spoke any English at all, he got a job running errands for the military, and they taught him English, and he sort of built his whole life this way. And I think that when I think about what is hard in life, nothing will ever be as hard as that. So that helps me sort of think through, hey, let's put things in perspective. But one thing he always says, because he likes spicy food, is that it's not a real meal unless you sweat. And he really thinks that, right? He carries around a bottle of Tabasco. If there are not beads of sweat like this lunch, it's not a meal. It is not a meal unless you sweat. And I think that's true about life too. You're not living unless you're sweating. You're not actually achieving things if you're not outside your comfort zone. So you're not eating a real meal unless you sweat. In terms of things that I do that help me become a better person and a better leader every day, I really believe in counting something and believing in something. So counting something, it's about what gets measured gets done. So whether it's from a business perspective, your revenue, your profitability, your customer count, really being accountable to numbers and counting something every day and all the time is the only way that you make progress. But it's not just data. I think some of the biggest advances we've made at Julep in terms of getting to the next frontier of growth have been on the art side, have been about believing in something, whether it's in ourselves, whether it's in our culture, whether it's in what we think women want, that there's a faith and a belief element that is really important. So it's data and belief together that are way more powerful than one side alone. And I think in version 1.0 of e-commerce that was funded by Silicon Valley, I think it went to data-centric, that if you're selling things to women, which is sort of, women make up 90% of consumer spending outside of cars and electronics. You have to understand what it is that they want and how they shop and what discovery and emotional delight that is part of this whole equation. All right. Another important thing that I wanted to share while I have the stage and kind of thinking about ways that I could be helpful to you guys. I think it's really important to have a mentor, have lots of mentors in your life. They don't have to look like you. They don't have to think like you. They don't even have to be older than you. You know, all you need is somebody who cares. It's a super important thing, especially, I think, for younger women. I actually think that all of my mentors, the most important mentors in my life, have been men, because that's sort of the way the business world works. But what's really powerful, whether you are a mentor or a mentee, is when somebody serious really believes in you for the first time. It makes such a huge impact, right? So for me, this was Steve Gunby, who was the CEO of the Boston Consulting Group. I was a grown woman, and one time when he called and I saw his name come up on my cell phone, I fell out of my chair. That's how much fear he struck in the hearts of all of us. You know, but the minute that he says, hey, you know, and he was famous for being super critical, right? So I went in for my review with him, and it was like, hey, Jane, you're not the fastest person at math. You know, your charts kind of suck sometimes. I was like, oh my gosh, this is not going well. But at the end of it, he said, you know, but these are the things that you're doing well, and you're connecting with people, and you're making an impact, and you care about the results, and it's making a huge difference in this project. And that was really helpful, like the first person who sees you for who you are. So that, at that moment, I knew I wasn't tricking anybody anymore, which is what I thought, like, oh my God, I got into Princeton because I tricked them and there's some administrative error, right? And there's a lot of us that feel that way as we're moving through life. And the first time somebody really can say, here's like, by the way, a huge extensive list of your faults. But here are the things that I see that are special. And he was the first person to invest in Julep when I wanted to leave Starbucks. Actually, I called him and I was telling him about this idea, and he said, I didn't know the words to ask for an investment because I'd never done this before. I didn't have incorporation or anything like that. It was just an idea. And he said, is this like NPR? If I write you a check, will you stop calling me? And that is how I got my first investment. And then I thought about it. I was like, oh my God, I can't go around doing this all the time. Like, what are the words? How do I close the deal? So I started out with the phrase, do you want to participate? Because that felt right to me from the venture that we were starting. I wanted people to be part of the team. I wanted our investors to be on the journey with us. And I wanted people who would think about it that way. So the words that I used to get the investment were those. It's interesting because I said this the other day to another entrepreneur, and I said, hey, how did you know what to use? What did you say when you wanted to ask? And he said his request was, do you want to be on the right side of history? So a slightly different approach than mine. Hey, ask for what you need. It's better to hear no from the universe, from others, than to say it to yourself. And you know what? The worst case, if somebody says no, you're not in a worse place than you were before, right? So I think this is a super important thing to think about, because even thinking about this will transform the way you view the world, and will start opening up opportunities for what are the things I could ask for of my work environment, of my relationships, of whatever it is. I think that's a super liberating piece as well, when you realize that no is not the worst thing. The only thing that's bad about no is when you're saying it to yourself before asking somebody else. And the number one lesson, this is a really important part of our Julep culture, again in a very cross-functional environment, is assuming positive intent. So this is a very specific thing. Like collaboration, it can mean a lot of different things, but I have a very specific definition of it. And so when somebody is telling you something that you don't want to hear, often for me, it's, hey, Jane, it can't be done next month. That's not the answer I want to hear. Before you are frustrated, to stop and think, hey, we're on the same team. They want the same things that I do, which is for Julep to be successful, for us to be winning as a team. So what are the possible good reasons this person can be telling me this result that I absolutely hate? And if you go through that mental exercise, it's super helpful to sort of imagining that you're on the same team. And it's especially helpful when you're getting answers from others that you're not anticipating or that you don't understand. That instead of thinking, hey, you're lazy, you're not delivering, you're trying to tank this project, what if instead you thought through, like, what is the possible positive reason that this person could be telling me this crazy thing that I don't believe? So it's a super important part of the way that we work at Julep. I can see it happening across people's faces when we're working in cross-functional teams together. And I think it's just a mentally healthier way to attract the universe as well. All right, so I think we have a little bit of time for Q&A.
I just have some questions on some of your biggest key learnings about being an entrepreneur and how you apply those to your rapidly growing staff at Julep.
Every day. I mean, I think all of those things. Actually, I, in fact, wrote an operating instructions for how to work with me that I shared with my team. Because one of the things that the hardest transitions to make is, like, I was employee number, whatever, 150,000 at Starbucks, right? So I still sort of a lot of times think of myself that way, and I don't realize that things I say, like the other day somebody was telling me, it must be a good day because you're laughing a lot. And I was like, holy geez, are people really counting how many times I laugh? And thinking that that's a barometer for anything in the company. So I think the things that I say clearly have a lot more meaning now than I am used to. And so I think it's just using all of those things every day. I mean, I think at every meeting, I think about positive intent. Or, when we think about, just today we were talking about changing our cancellation flow. And, we had 4 different ideas for how to do it. And I said, well, let's do this. It probably won't work, or it's okay if it doesn't work. But I think it's really just woven into everything that we do. I don't know if you had any more specific question than that.
Just more the idea, I mean, yes, I answered it, but more the idea of positive intent, how you help your staff to understand that in the way that they work with one another.
Oh, that one is every day, every minute. I mean, that somebody comes to me and says, gosh, this person is really standing in the way of this project and we can't get it done with them, and to stop and say, well, do you understand what that person's job is? Like, is there a reason why they're saying this thing? Give me 3 reasons, ideas for why they could be acting this way. And I think just going through that exercise is incredibly helpful. And then if you don't know, if you're like, I have no idea, then it's like, well, why don't you go and ask them? And also, like, learn a little bit about what that function is like. Like, hey, physical manufacturing is different than writing code in that products have to come to us from, the brushes come from China, the glass comes from Italy, the raw ingredients come from all over the US, and it's assembled here in New Jersey. So it's different. The process of managing that project is different, and the timelines and how you can impact them is different, because you can't just get product across the world that quickly. So I think it's sort of stopping to understand like really what the world looks like from somebody else's shoes. This is another kind of common thing that I say is that I hate the golden rule. Like, you shouldn't treat people the way you want to be treated, because you know what? They're not you. That's so dumb. Like, what you should do is stop and think about what the world looks like from that person's shoes, and then kind of work with them accordingly. I think it's something that I learned as a parent, because I feel like I did everything exactly the same way with 2 kids and with very different results. And so you realize, like, hey, these people are different, and you need to sort of figure out who they are and what motivates them and what the world looks like from their shoes and what could be going on in their brains to give you this input. But people are always at my desk saying, you know, and this person said this, or this isn't, you know, I'm challenged here. And I think that's a piece of advice I probably dole out at least once a day, both to myself and to somebody else.
This concept of an operating manual for yourself is so interesting because Jane sent it to the board, and it's really, really long. It's like a 10-page thing of like, this is who I am, and this is what, you know, when I say this, I mean that. This is how best to communicate with me. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm not so good at. It's funny, I was actually just discussing this with one of my direct reports, saying that that person should do something similar to this with their direct reports as a way to say, look, this is, you know, this is what I'm like, and this is what I'm not like. And some of you have probably seen these like styrofoam cubes kind of floating around the office from Insights training. We're starting to take these personality type tests, and eventually it's going to be pervasive around the company. That's what that whole initiative is about figuring out, you know, what color do you lead with, and how do you communicate, and how should people communicate back to you. And I mean, you take this really seriously, and you're totally transparent with people. But like, what's an example of I don't know, of something that somebody on your staff would have learned about you, about how to communicate with you, that as a result of that?
Oh, you know, one thing is that I always have a hypothesis, but I'm willing to move away from it. And so I'm not really good at working with introverts who need to sort of think on the fly. So my co-founder, Kate McDonald, needs to like be on her own to think. And we had this hilarious thing. We've been sitting next to each other. We have open offices for forever. And I'm always like, I can't think if I'm not talking to you. And she's like, I can't think if you're talking to me. And so that was something that, hey, if you're the kind of person, and I said that in my operating manual, who needs to think about things, because that's valid, and I'm not saying that's wrong, I'm not that kind of person, right? So I'm like, literally, make up an excuse. I have to go to the bathroom. If we're in a meeting and I'm like drilling on sort of why can't we do this, and what about this, and what if we tried this, and you just need a second to reset, I'm like, go to the bathroom. Or you can just say, look, I need to come back to you tomorrow. I'm going to schedule time, but I can't do this right now. I just need a minute. And I'll probably still be like, because I'm human too. I know this about myself, but it doesn't mean it makes the response any easier. But I think that's helpful. And then I forget things super quickly in terms of these kinds of interactions. And so I don't go home and stew, like, why didn't that person have that thing when I wanted to talk about it? You know, if you're like, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll be like, oh, but then, you know, fine. Then we'll have a great conversation tomorrow. We'll make progress, and it'll be fantastic. I'll get what I want. You'll get what you need. But if you misinterpret that moment of sort of me pushing forward in a meeting and you just need a second, I think there's been a lot of unconstructive sort of conversation that has happened because of my need to communicate and work things out together.
Totally random question. I'm sure you've never heard this before. How often do you change your nail polish?
Now that I have the Julep Plie wand, you know, it's interesting because the advent of the wand has come with the advent of our new polish formulation as well. And so on the one hand, it's fun and I want to change it all the time. On the other hand, it lasts longer, so I don't have to. So sorry to put two product you know, pitches in with that answer, but I think pretty much at least once a week and a lot of times twice a week.
Can you talk about some of the other products that you've expanded into besides nail polish, and just also talk about the brand challenge of doing that? It's something that we have, this brand challenge. We started with Zestimates, and then we started telling our users that we also have homes for sale, and now we're trying to tell them that we have rentals and home improvement and mortgages and da-da-da-da-da. So do most people think of Julep as a nail polish brand, and how do you try to move beyond that?
You know, it's so important, I think, in having these conversations to get outside your own head. I think a lot of times we forget that we're the only ones who know us as well as we know us. And so a lot of people are meeting us for the first time, and probably even for Zillow, although, one of my very first I remember when Zillow first came out, we were all super excited. We went online and we looked up the addresses of all of our bosses, of Steve Gunby, who I just told you about. That's the very first thing I did on Zillow, was look up what his house was worth. Sorry, Steve, if you're watching. I bet there's still a lot of people who haven't heard of Zillow, and for them, meeting you today is sort of meeting the whole of who you are. So we always think about that. It's sort of, I do ask the question a lot, what would we do if we were starting out today? Because that frees you from all of the fake limitations of where you've been so far. And then for all intents and purposes, for the new people you are meeting, you are invented today. You didn't exist yesterday, and you came into being today. So as a young brand, that's how we think of it. Whenever my team is like, oh, you've done nail polish, and now how can we do this bare-face cleansing oil, even though it's an awesome product? Hey, shouldn't we launch lipsticks first, and then eyeliners, and then skincare later? That's sort of, it's like, why? Like, we don't have a physical shelf space. It's not sitting all in one place together. If we have an amazing product we want to launch, we should be able to do it right now. And people don't know any different, right? It's like the world is what you tell them it is, and it is what you tell yourself it is. So I think there's a lot of freedom, and especially being an online company. I've worked, obviously, at Starbucks and in physical retail. And you want to do a change there, and it is for real. It is a 2-year planning process with ordering physical shelving that has to be installed by somebody, right? And all of these places in order for it to be consistent. So, the great thing about being an online company is that you can iterate and you can be somebody new tomorrow. So I think the whole sort of background that I was telling you guys about in terms of where I came from, and sort of living in a house where there were these rules. Like, when I grew up, I wasn't allowed to say times and equals when I said the multiplication table. They were like, you have to go faster. It has to be 224, 236, 248, 2510. And I had to do all of that. There was also a rule that you had to come to the door within 2 minutes of your parents coming home, which I wish I could enforce with my kids, right? How great is it to walk in?
Yeah, I like that.
I know, and have somebody come and greet you and say hi. But these were rules that were like inviolate as far as my parents were concerned. But then it turns out in every other house I went into, nobody did this, right, as a teenager. And so I always had the sense that there are no rules other than the ones that you make up, and it's because of that background. And so thinking about that from a corporate perspective, like, who says you can't? I mean, that's something that we always say is like, has anybody told you that you can't have this business line? 10 years from now, everybody's going to think that you were always that way. They're not going to remember that you started off in a place and you didn't have these other pieces. And so if there's nobody telling you in a valid and convincing way that you can't do something, then I think the default is that you can.
So there are a lot of interesting aspects of being a female entrepreneur, and also in a company whose product is primarily geared at females. But I'm interested in particular on the fundraising side of things.
Yeah.
When you've now raised funds from VCs twice, or I guess
three times, although
times.
It feels like 800.
So, I mean, when you're going up and down Sand Hill Road pitching VC after VC, and they're used to seeing a 26-year-old white male software developer pitching, and then you come in talking about nail polish and beauty brands, et cetera, can you describe what that's like, and how did you manage to get $60 million in venture capital from people like that?
My perspective on VC financing is that it's like democracy. I'm super grateful for it. Look, I've raised $55 million to build the company of my dreams. In what other country and what other place is that a possibility? So it's amazing, right? But it's also totally broken and crazy, which is also democracy, right? There's nothing better out there, but that's not to say that it's not an insane system to begin with. So yeah, it's just different. I'm super grateful for the people that we have. I think Mavron and Andreessen Horowitz, now Madrona and Azure, are amazing people in terms of the people I've interacted with, and have been super supportive of what we wanted to do as a company. So we ended up in the right place, but hey, it took a lot of conversations. I mean, I kept a spreadsheet, so I read Howard Schultz's book a while ago, and he talked about how many people he pitched in order to start Starbucks, and I put that number into an Excel spreadsheet, and I kept track of how many people I was talking to. And I think, I think he, at the end of the day, he had a better batting average than I did. But you find the right people by talking to a lot of people. That was my perspective. With my background, the schools I went to, BCG, Starbucks, it actually wasn't helpful that I got meetings everywhere. And I don't live there, right, because most of the financing is in Silicon Valley. So I'm waking up at 3 in the morning to make lunches for my kids, because by the way, my husband has a full-time real job, and he's at home alone with them while I'm out traveling, so I'm trying to do something sort of vaguely helpful. So I'm putting together the lunches, then I get on a 6 a.m. flight that gets me to Silicon Valley, and I'm pitching all day long and trying to make it back home that same night. So just different pressures, and yeah, I totally, there's a guy who's like 25 and his hair's rumpled and hasn't showered, and I'm like, oh my God, he's totally going to get the funding for some sexting app. Right? I mean, but you have to have a sense of humor about it. The right things happen. But in seriousness, I do think that the whole technology space has been shockingly inhospitable for women. Coming from I've worked in places, like when I worked at BCG, I did a project for an automotive company where we presented to a board, and we were up all night getting the deck together, and so we were super tired the next day. And I was able to go into the women's bathroom and take an hour-long nap because there were no other women like anywhere in the building. I was like, you guys are screwed, because the CEO is a guy and all the board members are guys, and they're going to find you if you go nap. But I am totally cool. I've worked in industries like that, and what's funny about technology is that it's so forward-looking and visionary and trying to change the world in so many ways. And in this one way, it's crazy. I mean, I think Evan Spiegel at Snapchat owes me engineers, because if he weren't such a jerk, I think more women would be in engineering, and I wouldn't have the labor shortage that I do, that we all experience, right? It's hard to recruit engineers. Imagine if our pool for software engineers was double, because more girls stayed in science and math, and there were more women available in that area, right? I mean, all of our problems in terms of recruiting as a technology company would be solved. So it's an issue I have a lot of passion around. I think there are dynamics that are so complex to talk about, because getting VC financing is like winning the lottery. There are no statistics you can put at it. I mean, a guy once told me, a really great guy, right, who was actually had the foresight to make the black box less opaque, and he said, look, here's the deal. It's a fundable idea. You have great metrics. I'm just not interested in beauty as a category. And it's like, hey, you know what? I know that the institutional financing that put money into your firm wants returns. I don't think they care so much about whether you have passion for what you're doing. But on the flip side, I mean, I have a son. He's like, hey, I only do one deal a year. I want it to be a deal that I'm passionate about. It's not a bad sentiment. It's the intersection of that sentiment in a truly homogeneous environment that changes the rules of the game. So, I mean, I think my, what I always ask of people is that, hey, all of the guys out there, and Spencer's been great about doing this with me, but like mentor women, be there and be available to help. When you're looking at industries, be open to learning outside of your interest category, because if Silicon Valley only funds the things that they're interested in, it's how come we have all, Snapchats in the world. So I'm picking on that one in particular, but.
He asked for it when he sent all those emails. But I mean, this is something I feel passionate about, as you know. It's like our biggest problem as a company at Zillow and as a society in the country is not enough people in the knowledge workforce and not enough computer scientists. And basically half the population doesn't take enough interest in computer science, and that's part of the problem. It's a significant part of the problem. So, I mean, organizations like code.org that are trying to get, and Girls Who Code and these other organizations that are trying to kind of, right at school age, try to get girls and young women more interested in software are so important.
Yeah, and if you guys know people, or if you're at all considering career changes, like one thing that I really found is that women take themselves out of the game. You know, there's, I think that was a central thesis around the lean in, that, you know, whether you agree with every part of the book or not. The thing that I do know is that women take themselves out a lot more than they need to. So when I was at Yale, it was a 50-50 class environment, male-female. Interestingly, though, Supreme Court clerkships, which is sort of the biggest, most prized thing to do in the legal community after you graduate, that quickly turned into 10% female, 90% male, from out of the same school, Yale, right? So we were like, how could this happen? You go from 50-50 to 10-90 in one fell swoop, right? This is not like law firm partner where you're moving up the ranks. This is one step, 1 year, and you have such a huge transition. And so we interviewed people, and what we found is that the guys would have basically like the equivalent of Bs, you know, and they'd be like, I'm so cool, I'm gonna apply for a Supreme Court clerkship. And the women would have all As and be like, who am I to apply for a Supreme Court clerkship? I didn't publish an article. I wasn't on the Yale Law Journal. Like, I didn't TA for a professor, you know? So there were all these reasons they were giving to take themselves out of the game. And then when you looked at the application acceptance rate from the Supreme Court perspective, it was, they were accepting women at the same rate that they were accepting men. So if they had 10 male applicants, they'd choose one. And if they had 10 female applicants, they'd choose one. But the women had already taken themselves out of the pool by the time those decisions were being made. And so I think, I say that because I think in particular women in engineering, and it's something that I've talked to a lot of people about, you know, they early on say, well, I'm not really good at this. I'm not as good as those guys are. And even, you know, people who have gone through training and programs at the end of the day won't seek jobs for it. They'll go out and look for different jobs, not in engineering, because they're like, you know, I'm not good at this. And part of it is also the environment isn't hospitable. Like, you know, if it doesn't feel welcoming and you don't feel good at it, then it's a double whammy. So anyway, all of you who have daughters or anybody with younger sisters, cousins, encourage them to stay in the game. And if you are at all interested in coding and, you know, you're whatever, younger than 50, you should look at it as a career.
So I was, on Tuesday, I was at the Fortune Brainstorm conference in Aspen, and there was a discussion, a woman named Clara, I think her last name is Shea, she's on the board of Starbucks actually, and she runs a company called Hearsay Media, and she's an Asian American woman who's a computer scientist. She and the dean of the Harvey Mudd School of Engineering, who's a woman, where 56% of Harvey Mudd's graduating computer scientists are actually women, which is shocking compared with where the rest of the country's at. Anyway, they were discussing this topic, and Clara said, as a female Asian American software developer, the best advice she ever got from an older mentor was fake it till you make it, because you know, it's all about self-confidence, and that you're exactly right, that the guys in the computer science classes at Stanford where she went were always raising their hand, always answering all the questions, and what few girls start there, by the end, they have lost their self-confidence and they end up not coming out the other end. Anyway, so.
Yeah, my favorite thing to tell people who say, like, I don't know what I'm doing is, it's okay, like, nobody else does either. Yeah, you probably don't know what you're doing, it's true. But do you think they do?
Yeah, Whitney.
Jane, thanks so much for coming. I was really impressed that you said that you write all those handwritten thank you notes, and I am a big believer of handwritten communication, but I also work in social here. So we found that when we tell people, you know, we help them, 10% of people actually get back to us and say, Thank you. So have you ever considered taking your handwritten notes and moving them online and doing like personal shout outs on social, and just curious like how you manage your personal brand?
And what's so exciting about building a brand in today's day and era is that as the CEO and founder, I'm all over our Facebook site as Jane. I have a public figure account, and like they don't even believe it's me. They're like, it's not her. Like, what do I have to do to prove to you that I'm on this page, I'm listening, I'm reading every customer feedback, and I'm actually responding? There was a period of time when we were first getting started when we had no systems in place, and so a lot of things were screwing up, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to change my title to Chief Apology Officer, because that's what I'm doing every day is I'm really sorry that this happened. And as we're sort of getting all of our systems together, I still do it. I think that my moral of the story is even if they don't respond, that it's still good to do. People on Facebook have taken pictures of the handwritten cards I write them and have compared notes to be like, is this the same handwriting? And then they're like, and she probably had her assistant do it. And it's like, no, my handwriting's super illegible. It's really hard to fake that.
All right, last question. There's a question from someone by text. How does Julep come up with names for products? So I will start by answering this question because my two daughters, Sophia and Katerina, have nail polishes named after them. The Fia and the Katerina, which are probably somewhere on that table. So anyway, other than board members' kids' names, how else do you come up with names for products?
A lot of that, it's like one of the most fun things that we get to do, right? So it's great because it's clearly not the majority of our day is spent naming products, but I have to, actually this can be the first semi-public forum in which we're saying that we have a new mascara coming out, which I got to name, and we're calling it Length Matters. At least in mascara. So it's fun, right? I mean, this is not like curing cancer, it's fun. So part of it is that sometimes it's community and collaborative. There was a woman who shared a story about coming to the physical Julep every month after she had chemo, and her mom was with her for every single appointment, and she wanted to name a Polish Gloria after her mom, and so we did. That Gloria is named after her, and there was a lot of conversation on Facebook around it. So whenever we can let people in, because I know a lot of people love that, everybody wants to know what's the nail polish naming job. And our head of product development, Michelle Laudermoser, I think she would love it if that was 90% of her job, right? And the rest of it wasn't supplier management and ingredients management and all of the other things you have to do. But the naming products is super fun. I think, hey, whenever you have something fun in your job, just make the most out of it because, heaven knows not every minute is that way.
Well, Jane, thank you very much for being here. I'm happy to be participating. So, thank you.